Thank you, Deputy Jones. On the Murray case, Dr. Murray is present with his counsel as before. The people by their counsel as before. Dr. White, once again, is on the witness stand. All the jurors and the alternates are present as before. To everybody, good morning again, and to the jurors, good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. And Dr. White, good morning again, sir. Do you again acknowledge you're still under oath and still sworn to tell the truth?
Yes, I do,
Thank
Your
you.
Honor.
Resumption of cross-examination. Mr. Waldman. Thank you.
Dr. White, so you were telling us that you met with Dr. Ornelas last week. That was the first time you met with her? Or spoke to her?
If I may give some background,
No, I want to know when you first spoke to her. That was last week?
Yes, I spoke to an individual involved in the defense, and he recommended that to answer my questions about Dr. Schaefer's model, which was presented to me for the first time about 10 days ago, that I consult with Dr. Mellon Ornelas, who's an expert in pharmacokinetics.
You're aware that Dr. Schaefer actually provided his spreadsheet and software to the defense. You're aware of that, correct?
Yes, I am, but I did not see his infusion theory until very recently for the first time.
And what you had provided to the people from Dr. Ornelas is a piece of paper with computer code written all over it. No software, correct?
I was not asked to provide software, so all I provided was the printout. Yes, sir.
Can you make sense of this computer code?
I think I said earlier that pharmacokinetic modeling is not my expertise.
So you knew this wouldn't mean anything to me, right?
I don't know your expertise, sir. It certainly would mean something to Dr. Schaefer, since she used the same model that Dr. Schaefer used in his modeling, namely the model by Dr. Schneider.
Did you ask Dr. Ornelas to provide the software to the people?
Overruled. You may answer it.
I don't recall that I even thought about it.
Had you ever heard of Dr. Ornelas before someone in the defense team told you to contact her?
No, I had never met Dr. Ornelas.
My question was, had you ever even heard of her?
Well, I didn't do a PubMed search, if that's what you're asking.
Had you ever heard of her? In the pharmacokinetic field, in anesthesiology, had you ever heard of Dr. Ornelas before someone from the defense team told you to contact her, yes or no?
The answer is no.
Now, after following the point in time when you rejected the theory of oral ingestion of propofol, was it then your theory that Michael Jackson consumed the 8 lorazepam pills at 10 a.m.?
At some time after I wrote the letter to Mr. Flanagan and prior to my appearance at court in L.A.
At some point, did you advance the theory that Michael Jackson consumed the 8 2-milligram lorazepam pills at 10 a.m.?
I don't think there was any specific theory put forth. It was a discussion about whether a large number of lorazepam pills could have been consumed at some time prior to the administration of the final fatal dose of propofol.
Well, you were present in court when Mr. Flanagan repeatedly put forth hypotheticals, specifically asking witnesses to assume lorazepam pills were swallowed at 10 a.m., correct? You recall those hypotheticals?
Actually, I don't.
And you're aware that there's a 2-hour, basically, peak in lorazepam, so if you put forth a theory at 10 a.m., that would fit nicely to the peak hitting at noon when you would opine that Michael Jackson self-injected propofol, correct?
One, in reading the literature, it does suggest that the peak effect occurs in 1 to 2 hours. However, you have to reconcile that with the residual that might be present in the stomach if the pills are taken orally.
And Dr. Schaefer testified that 10 a.m. Oral administration of lorazepam was impossible based on the amount in the stomach and the absorption that would take place. He testified, while you sat here and took notes, he testified that it would have had to have occurred at least 4 hours prior, correct?
I think he said 4 to 6 hours is what I recall.
Okay. And then following that, at some point you met with Dr. Anellis and created a computer model where you now put the time of lorazepam administration by Michael Jackson at around 7 a.m. So it would fall outside of the window that Dr. Schaefer testified to, correct?
Dr. Anellis used the same models that Dr. Schaefer employed in his analysis.
The
work
lorazepam pills, that was an assumption you were putting into the model, correct? And you told her to put it at 7 a.m., correct?
It's a compound question. Could you refine it, please? Sustained by the court.
You told Dr. Anellis to put in a 7 a.m. administration of oral lorazepam, correct?
Incorrect.
She came up with that on her own?
She was watching the trial and Dr. Schaefer's testimony on TV.
Okay, so she knew then what window of time to use from watching it on TV. She knew then that 10 a.m. Was impossible, correct?
I think she looked at the Greenblatt articles that we discussed and figured out how much time for dissolution, how much time for absorption, and on that basis, in the concentration that was found at autopsy, created various scenarios, just as Dr. Schaefer has created various scenarios based on a single concentration found at the time of autopsy. They're both working backwards, both utilize the same pharmacokinetic models.
But the 10 a.m. hypothetical is no longer being put forth, and now it's 7 a.m., and that was put forth following Dr. Schaefer's testimony, correct?
I'm not aware of that. I never put forth the 10 a.m. model, so I can't.
So you don't know where that information...
Allow the witness to finish, please. So I can't?
So I can't really make a judgment because it was never my opinion, nor was I aware that was put forth as the time at which the proposed oral doses were given. I think what I said on Friday, if I may, was that it's possible that there were multiple doses taken orally at different time intervals prior to 7 or 8 a.m. I think I said 7 a.m.
Well, that would drastically change the simulation. I mean, what the simulation shows is 7 a.m., correct?
Yeah, that's if all the pills, I think, were taken at the same time.
But that's the simulation you presented, correct?
I presented two simulations, sir. One had an assumption that there was no prior administration of lorazepam, that is, no pre-existing, which I really think is unlikely, and then a more likely scenario that shows the lorazepam that one would expect to be present from the day before, because lorazepam has a very long half-life.
If Michael Jackson had come to you, Dr. White, and indicated that he would like to hire you to administer propofol to him to put him to sleep each night in his bedroom, would you do it?
Absolutely not. That would be a job that I would never consider accepting, just because of the onerous requirements in terms of time.
Thank you. Oh, just because of time? That's the only reason?
Well, I would reject it.
Yeah, let's clear this up. Just because of time?
I said the time alone would be a factor that I wouldn't even consider, would make me not even want to consider it.
Setting aside the concern about your time, would you consider, if Michael Jackson had asked you to give him propofol each night to put him to sleep in his bedroom, other than time concerns, are you saying you would do it?
I'm saying I wouldn't even consider it.
Is that because of concerns about time?
It's something that no amount of money could convince me to accept or take on as a responsibility, because of time, because of just the responsibility for someone, and the fact that this was a complete off-label use of the drug which had not been studied prior to, as you know, 2011.
Okay, so you would not do it?
Correct.
Okay. Now, in the simulation regarding propofol, in which you put forth to the jury that Michael Jackson self-administered, I believe it was 11:40 on the simulation. Is that accurate? Sometime just before noon?
Correct.
And in putting forth that scenario, there were a number of assumptions you had to make because, for one thing, there's no medical records to reference, correct?
Yeah, I'm sorry, did you say 11:40 or 10:40?
11:40 for your theory of Michael Jackson self-administering?
Okay, something around 11:40, 10 to 11:50, yes.
Okay. And there were a large number of assumptions that had to be made because, for one thing, there are no medical records to reference, correct?
Yes, there were a number of assumptions required for all the models that have been presented before the court.
And in your simulation that Dr. Ornelas created for you, you were basing this on Conrad Murray's statement that he left the room for 2 minutes, and then these events took place, and Conrad Murray came back to the room. Is that the time period you're referencing, the 2 minutes that Conrad Murray indicated in his statement to police?
No, that is not.
So that's a different, in your analysis of the case, Dr. Murray leaving for 2 minutes is a different time period than when this scenario transpired. Is that correct?
Yes, I guess the answer is yes. Can I just add that I never asked Dr. Ornelas to make the simulations. I merely asked her a very simple question, and that is, could she help me understand how much free propofol and propofol metabolite might be expected in the urine at the time of autopsy if Mr. Jackson had received 1,000 milligrams as opposed to 25 milligrams.
When did you begin or request the animal study regarding oral propofol?
Shortly after I prepared my report, I had a discussion with Mr. Flanagan, questioning myself.
My question is, when did you?
I think it was perhaps after being shown a copy of Dr. Schaefer's report. I can't be sure, but that would be a possibility that would have stimulated my interest. That was the first time I became aware of the piglet study because that didn't come up on my Medline search. And
because you searched for oral propofol and it didn't come up and your research was concluded, correct?
yes, that's what I was looking for.
And then you got Dr. Schaefer's report, which is dated April 15th, 2011. Had you done any research between March 8th, 2011 and April 18th, 2011 to confirm that your preliminary thoughts were accurate?
No, I had not done any research.
Okay, so when did you request this animal study? Can you tell me which month?
We discussed it either at the end of April or in May.
And did you do the study or did you have someone do it for you?
No, Mr. Flanagan stated that he knew a veterinarian in Indiana who could conduct the study. Initially, the study was to be...
Let me just ask. So you had nothing to do with the study as a scientist?
I did not directly participate, no.
Mr. Flanagan had someone do the study in Indiana?
That's correct.
Did you oversee it in any way?
I was not directly involved, as you said.
Okay, so Mr. Flanagan requested an animal study in Indiana sometime after you received Dr. Schaefer's report. Is that correct?
Correct.
And this was someone he knew in Indiana. That's what was relayed to you.
Yes, that he knew a veterinarian who was capable of doing a study which would evaluate oral absorption of propofol.
And what kind